Okay, before you judge me too much for this one, just hear me out. Look, I love shiny hunting. New games or old, it's become one of my favorite things to do in these games ever since I started it back in Sword and Shield. And I now regularly hop from generation to generation in order to shiny hunt. And I've tried all sorts of hunts too. You've got your classic soft resetting, especially in Gens 2 through 4, egg hatching with shiny Ditto in Gen 2, which is still probably my personal favorite, radar hunting in Gen 6 and later in Gen 8, and then Masuda breeding in Gen 7 through 9. I tried it in old generations as well, but failed spectacularly. And then even the Dynamax adventures in Sword and Shield. I know some people didn't love them, but I thought they were great. And then the sandwiches, I mean, those just made it so easy, but they were still a lot of fun. I have had a few hunts I gave up on, especially Catch of the Day Lapras. To this day is still the worst one I've ever gone for. But for the most part, I've seen through almost every shiny hunt I tried, and it's been a lot of fun. And that includes modern shiny hunting. Despite the title of the video, I actually really enjoy it. Yes, the sandwich thing is honestly a little silly to set up, but it's still funny. And I like it the same way I like Dynamax Adventures, or the Poke Radar, or even chain catching in Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. What I really like about shiny hunting is the gamification of it in modern titles. I appreciate that with each passing game, Game Freak continues to add fun little twists and mini games to further cement shiny hunting as a sport or activity within the Pokemon community. What I really want is for them to be able to do even more with it, and that's where my thoughts on the shiny rates came in the first place. So if you're someone who spent any time on pretty much any online Pokemon community, you'll almost inevitably come across some comment regarding the availability of shinies in modern Pokemon. Comments saying there are too many or it's too easy. Other comments saying maybe the value of shinies has been ruined depending on the game they're from, and so on, stuff like that. On a personal level, I can't fully agree, but I do understand the sentiment. Entering the Switch generation of Pokemon games especially, we saw a huge gameplay shift that, at least in Let's Go and Scarlet Violet, made it much easier to find shinies, even without actually shiny hunting them. In case it wasn't obvious, by the way, I'm talking about being able to see Pokemon, including shinies, in the overworld map. Which, by the way, I think is a great change. Just from a pure gameplay perspective, it's more organic and makes the world feel more alive when you can see them freely roaming in the overworld. However, the reality is that back when players were limited to random encounters, the number of Pokemon you'd see per game was much, much lower than it is now. Yeah, sure, they could maybe do more of what they did in Sword and Shield, locking shininess in the overworld to force encounters for players to actually confirm if something is shiny or not, but I actually don't think this is the right call. I think a much easier fix, so to speak, is just going back to the old shiny rate of 1 in 8,192. And like I said, just hear me out on it. Even with this drastically reduced shiny rate, you're still a lot more likely to spot shinies in the overworld than in the old games. You're seeing so many more Pokemon than you ever could have imagined, or ever could have managed on a single playthrough compared to those early gens. Think about Gens 2 to 5, where you're actually in the wild getting random encounters. You likely see, let's say, 1 to 2 Pokemon in a minute, depending on encounter rate and battle speed. Now you look at something like Scarlet and Violet. At least on the Switch 2, the game can display over 30 Pokemon on screen at any given time. There's no comparison here. Even with those low odds of 1 in 8,192, you've got a pretty decent chance of a shiny spawning within your sight, even with no bonuses added. Start adding in these bonuses, and that lower rate becomes a non-issue. Let's take a look at another game. Pokemon Let's Go. While not quite as easy as Scarlet and Violet, it's another pretty friendly game to shiny hunt in, to put it nicely. Base odds are the same as every Pokemon game from Gen 6 and onwards. 1 in 4,096. Get the shiny charm, and those odds climb to 1 in 3,065. If it stopped there, the odds, yeah, they wouldn't be great, sure, but not terrible either. And this is where that gamification I talked about earlier comes in. Pokemon Let's Go has an interesting mechanic called catch combos. They're actually pretty straightforward. You just catch the same Pokemon repeatedly in a row while not catching anything else, or letting anything escape during the chain. Successfully building up and maintaining a chain of 31 gives the player pretty nice 1 in 341 odds on each subsequent spawn for a single catch. If a player is also using a lure, those odds climb slightly higher to 1 in 315. Add in the shiny charm on top, and they climb a bit more to 1 in 273. However, there's one thing that these games don't make use of in shiny hunting, which I've always thought to be a shame, and that's the quality of the catch. In Let's Go, if the player times their catch well, they get a rating, going from good to great to excellent. These do affect experience items and rewards players get from catches, but that's it. There's no effect on shininess. This strikes me as a bit of a lost opportunity, as it would be a perfect chance to further incentivize people with the in-game mechanics. Imagine if, instead of that 1 in 273 being a guarantee, it required at least a great level catch, or even good. But in exchange, hitting an excellent would net you yet another shiny roll, bringing your odds up to a bit more than the 1 in 273 I mentioned earlier, like 1 in 256. So 16 rolls, in other words. It could easily be scaled further to make good catches match the 1 in 273 instead, with great going up to 1 in 256 and excellent going up further to 1 in 241. My point is that better utilization of existing mechanics could have made shiny hunting even more engaging by creating a skill-based incentive. Another good example of a missed opportunity exists in Sword and Shield. I'm sure most viewers know how Dynamax adventures work, but I'll go over them just in case. So a group of 4 players, or some mix of players and NPCs, take on a series of Dynamax raids, which culminate in a 4th battle against a guaranteed legendary. All Pokemon in these adventures have significantly boosted shiny odds of 1 in 300, or 1 in 100 if you have the shiny charm. Even the legendaries, which is really pretty great. However, what wasn't so well managed was the second mode players could unlock after completing a few of these Dynamax adventures, which is Endless Dynamax Adventures. Actually, fun fact, at the time of me writing this, the first thing a Google search of Endless Dynamax Adventures brought up was a Reddit thread titled, "Does anyone actually do Dynamax Adventure Endless Mode?" And the name right there kind of gives away the whole problem. There's very little incentive to do Endless Dynamax Adventure Mode. The rewards simply don't match the time investment. You know those great shiny odds I mentioned for Dynamax Adventures? Well, they don't apply to Endless Mode at all. In fact, you just don't get to keep any of the Pokemon. Like I said, it's a huge wasted opportunity. Of course, I can respect that they didn't want to make it too easy to get shinies in these modes, but I think they overcompensated. They could have been encouraging deeper play, pushing players to engage more with the mechanics and think harder about how they went through these modes. Perhaps this would have been a little too convoluted, but just imagine, for example, that the shiny rate was attached to progress, specifically in the Endless Mode. Like a normal Dynamax adventure, Endless Dynamax Adventures were broken into sets of 4. Battle 3 Pokemon, then a legendary. Win the round, and you keep moving deeper into the cave, so to speak. Now let's say you don't get those insanely good odds on the first floor of the 1 in 300 or 1 in 100. Instead it was set at a lower rate, but for each floor you progressed, you got a boosted rate on each Pokemon you found. And of course, you would drop the rule about not taking any Pokemon, and instead have the same rule as a normal Dynamax adventure of only keeping 1. I can actually see the reasoning a bit for them not wanting to let you take a Pokemon. Maybe Game Freak was worried people would stop doing the normal Dynamax adventures, and they didn't want to take away their relevance. But people will always have a specific shiny hunt or goal that they want. And for those people, a standard Dynamax adventure is still the best choice, even if endless DAs let you keep a Pokemon. Instead, I think Game Freak really overcorrected, like I said before, and we were left with a mode almost no one cared about. Look, shinies are not actually essential to Pokemon. Not really. However, setting the shiny rate back down to the original rate wouldn't be about making shinies harder to find. It'd be about providing Game Freak with more headroom to offer players in-game methods for stacking bonuses while shiny hunting, but at the same time, not making it too easy. So like I said, don't hate me on this one, or take it as me hating on modern shiny hunting at all. I really love modern shiny hunting, and I just want to see Game Freak push the mechanics that exist within their games a bit further. And thanks for watching. I wasn't actually planning on doing another Pokemon video right away. I had another topic that I am still working on, but it's just taking a lot longer. My family also moved recently, so there's been a lot going on. Hoping I can put out another video sooner rather than later. We'll see. But in the meantime, have a nice day.